Are you going to call the panel? Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, esteemed guests, and all those joining us today for this insightful panel discussion on private sector engagement in climate change. Welcome to the prestigious International Conference on Sustainable Education hosted by CDP India. It is indeed an honor to stand before you and extend a warm welcome on this significant occasion. Today, we have gathered here to engage in a thoughtful dialogue about one of the most pressing challenges of our time, climate change. The issue of climate change affects us all, transcending geographical boundaries and industries. Therefore, it is imperative that we explore how the private sector, with its innovative approach and global influence, can actively contribute to combating this global crisis. We are fortunate to have a distinguished panel of experts who bring a wealth of experience and knowledge in the field of sustainability, climate change, and environmental governance. Let me briefly introduce our esteemed panelists. Steering this engagement discussion as a moderator is Ms. Pratna Bora, India Director of CDP, whose expertise in the sustainability and environmental landscape is unrecognized. She has over 2 decades of experience in strategic planning, building networks, and program leadership on diverse sustainability issues like climate change, air pollution, and biodiversity conservation. For our panelists, first we have Mr. Ashu Kalra, Vice President and Head of Global Corporate Real Estate and Environment Sustainability at EXL Services India Private Limited, with a remarkable 25 years in sustainable corporate real estate and environmental sustainability. Next, we have Mr. Ajay Pillai, leading the Sustainability and Climate offering for Deloitte, boasting over 22 years of consulting and advisory experience in environment and social governance, climate and sustainability. Joining us is Mr. Santosh Jairam, the Global Head of Sustainability at HCL Technologies, who has dedicated nearly 3 decades to the field of sustainability and climate change and has made significant contribution, including his work at KPMG. Last but not the least, we have Mr. K.K. Sharma, a highly accomplished professional with over 34 years of experience in agrochemical and pharmaceutical, who currently serves as the whole-time director EHS at DCM Shriram Limited. His effort is driving ESG initiatives are commendable. Today's panel discussion promises to be enlightening as our esteemed speakers will share their insight, experience, and solution regarding how the private sector can play a pivotal role in addressing climate change. Their collective wisdom will undoubtedly guide us towards a more sustainable future. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta. Very good afternoon, post-lunch session. We're just waiting for people to come in. This session is to talk about the importance of the involvement of the private sector in climate action and overall environmental issues. And I think as an organization, we are working with the private sector very closely, not just looking at them as the people who give us funding for generating projects, but also because there is a lot of complexity in the issues that pertain to climate, biodiversity, water, and forest, the 4 areas that we work in. And the idea is to get some of our partners who disclose to CDP in India to talk about the challenges that they face in addressing climate issues, as well as in terms of taking ahead the climate opportunity. We call it the opportunity in our last disclosure session, which was in 2022, the disclosure report that we released, the opportunity that was estimated by the private sector, that is about 125 companies that disclosed to us, was almost 30 billion USD. And this, we feel, is an interesting area to delve in, because it provides us with insights in terms of how energy transition, technology transition, and looking at the whole issue of regeneration and in the context of climate and ecosystems is becoming more and more important for the private sector. We see a very strong presence of the private sector in the global conventions. So I think this is an opportunity for us to talk about how climate is essentially becoming a very important factor in business strategy. So I have with us a panel that actually works very closely with us, so I know what work they do. And I'm going to start by asking each of them to introduce their work, and then I would have specific questions from each one of them. I'll move first to the corporates, the private sector who is here, the companies, and then, of course, I will have Deloitte come in, because they are also on the other side helping and supporting strategy planning within the corporate sector. So I'm going to start with my friend Santosh, with whom I have a lot of arguments and discussions on why and how the private sector needs to be more engaged and involved. And I want Santosh, I want you to give a brief overview on how you look at climate within the business strategy. And I'm going to come back to each one of you with that same question, because it will give different perspectives. Over to you, Santosh.
Hello. No, thank you. No, I'm good with this. So, first of all, thank you for having me here. And it's always good to be part of a panel discussion like this. And as Pratana said, that we always have this interaction between both of us as to what more can be done and what can be done differently as well. So let me bring it from a sector which I represent now, which is more on the IT side. And just like the 2 sides of the coin, from a strategic perspective also, there are 2 sides. In multiple dimensions, it's 2 sides. One is whether it is internal and external. That's the 2 sides. I will look at it from that side, internal to the company and even external. The other 2 sides, I would say, is the risk and the opportunity. And those are the 2 dimensions as well. The risk and opportunity drives the internal and external as well. So let me kind of go from that particular direction. From risk perspective, as we all know, people think that what's the risk for an IT company? But then if you go deeper into it and do a risk assessment, you will come to realize that yes, the physical risks are also applicable, because we do have offices in places which have a physical risk. And the physical risk also impacts, because it's a big, it's a company with a large number of employees. And definitely from the health of the employees and all those things, it does have an impact. And also from the productivity side as well. So the physical risk and also operating cost, because when the physical risks happen, the operating cost goes high, and hence that as well. Transition risk is quite big because when you operate in multiple sectors, if you start looking into um, the client sectors, you will find that some of your client sectors are more exposed to the climate risk. So if anything happens to them, naturally the business from them is going to go down for you, and hence that. Plus the regulatory things also comes in place because the world is moving into a low carbon economy, and hence there is regulatory pressure and the client pressures also bring in. So a lot of risk if you start looking into the future that's already facing the business. So hence the strategy need to evolve to kind of counter that risk. So that's one part which drives many of the things what we do internally, in the sense that how are you going to be ready in terms of your own emissions, how do you reduce your emissions, what is going to be your net zero strategy, and how fast you can reach there, because it's quite competitive. And today I can give you a transition that 2 years back we had a number of clients asking us, what is your enterprise level emissions? This year, initially now through CDP platform itself, I can say I have more than 100 clients requesting me specific to that client how much is the emission. So that has already come in. The third part, now we have a number of clients who are asking, can your climate commitment be part of the overall business agreement you have with us? So it's a SLA now. So the way in which it is transforming, until unless you look at it internally, how fast you can move to the net zero, how fast you can reduce your emissions, there is a competitiveness in this, and hence it is a business risk and that. From the opportunity side, when you look at it, yes, I think the convergence of digitalization and the transition to a net zero economy is very much linked. No sector around the world can move into that without a high degree of digitalization. So whether it is manufacturing or whether it is service, any of those forms, you require that. So there is a very, very high degree, like for example, everybody would have watched the Apple's video on how products are becoming. Like for example, we do, as at CL Tech, we have a service which is linked to engineering. We help companies to evolve sustainable products on the consumer side. So there we can kind of do a complete LCA digitally, and we can look at what are the areas of hotspots where emissions can be reduced by substitutes. You can bring all those substitutes into a digital twin platform and then fast test it to utilization, and hence the whole of the R&D about the product moving into a more sustainable product can be much, much faster. So even from product design to very simple things like monitoring and reporting as well, or for example, traceability. Most of the people, for example, today you have a whole lot of offset. So if you are traveling by any of the airlines, almost every airline today offers you offset. But do you know where the offset? Is that transparency available? How do you establish that transparency? How do you establish that traceability? Again, you require. So I think there are a whole lot of opportunities from the digital space, which is an opportunity for a company like us. So that also comes into our strategic direction. So when we overall look at it from a principle perspective, we have said that the way we will go forward is act, pact, and impact. And act is, it's a recognition that it all starts with us. So it is internal, in the sense that we will move into a operation which is much more efficient and less in terms of carbon intensive. The pact is, alone we can do limited. You need to work with the stakeholders. And there, for example, we are part of the Climate Pledge, we are part of the many other initiatives in the industry forums, and we were talking about the NASCOM initiative as well. So multiple such kind of initiatives, and also with the clients. I'll just end with this, sorry. Is that when we say there is a whole lot of possibilities from digitalization, I would also want to caution that when Clive Humby in 2006 said that data is the new oil, at that time, of course, economists took that to a higher level. But when he said that, what he meant was that both oil and data, you cannot use it in the raw form. You need to make it value added. But now there is a completely new dimension to that, because whether it is AI, ML, or ubiquitous computing, or indefinite storage, which all of you have on your mobiles and all those things, this sector is going to be one of the biggest energy consumers. So the more the digitalization happens, there is that side as well, which I think is also required. So it is not about digitalization for sustainability, but sustainability for digitalization also need to apply, otherwise we are going the wrong way. And that is also a direction where we work with in terms of data center efficiencies, as well as renewable energy in data centers, as well as green coding, for example. We have started that as well, because all your legacy systems use a lot of energy. So how do you move into green coding as well? So overall, I would say that both from a risk and opportunity space, it is well integrated into our strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. When you ask LinkedIn stop voice to start the panel, it becomes a little extended. So that wasn't meant to be. That wasn't meant to be. That's just a joke. Anyways, I think what Santosh has opened the panel very well. We've talked about, the 5 core areas that actually also when CDP requests for disclosure, we talk about risks, we talk about energy transition, we talk about opportunities. And I particularly like the fact, act, pact, and impact, because impact, I think, is very important. And I think that's very, especially for the digital and IT sector, because I think there is with the way the business is increasing, and today it's part of every other business, I think that becomes very important. So I'll move quickly to Mr. Sharma, because I think it'll be interesting to understand now where climate plays a role in the business strategy as far as the textiles and your sector is concerned.
Thank you, Pratna. First of all, I think let me thank CDP for giving me this opportunity to be part of this eminent panelists. The very first thing which comes to my mind is, unless I tell you about my company, will not be appropriate to share about my experience in terms of climate action. So I belong to DCM Shriram. We are into basically 3 verticals. One is agri-rural business, which takes care of agri inputs to the agricultural activities, and the second one is the chlor-alkali business, which basically is into chemicals and all, which is basically chlorine, hydrogen, and caustic. And then comes the third one, which is value-added products, which is PVC doors and windows and other products. So with that background, if you see, we are into not only products which are agri-based, which are directly related and ultimately affected by climate change. So there is a need to think in terms of strategic actions that are required. So right from the inception of the plants that were put up almost 50 years back, this concept of circular economy was very well in place. Let me tell you, our Kota facility, which is one of the largest chemical complex spread over 800 acres, the plants are so put up that one byproduct coming out of chlor-alkali product is a raw material for PVC. And similarly, calcium chloride is another product whereby acetylene is produced, which ultimately is utilized for manufacturing PVC. And the sludge which is getting generated from one of the calcium carbide process is ultimately utilized for making cement, where fly ash from the captive power plant is also consumed. So in a way, nutshell, just to make you understand that it's a closed loop. What we are talking today, it's very much evident 50 years back when these plants were put up with the same mindset of having circularity in mind. Going forward, the other plants, when they were put up, in Bharuch, we have another chlor-alkali plant where chlorine and all these allied products which are produced as part of caustic, The forward products that are forward integrated, you can say products that were looked into, like aluminum chloride, were part of the product portfolio. That way, it is not only a value-added product, but also in terms of circularity of the entire site. And now, in the strategy part, going forward, the new products which are proposed now in this year, 2 of the plants are under right now erection, which are epichlorohydrin as well as hydrogen peroxide. And all efforts are made that the raw materials which are being chosen for these products are green. The glycerin, which is one of the raw material for one of the epichlorohydrin, is from palm oil, which is again a green source of raw material. Coming to the other portfolio, which is sugar, where these sugar sites are there, we have an integrated distillery units where alcohol is produced from the molasses, which is again one of the byproducts from the sugar industry. And of course, bagasse is something which have been used for generating power, which is the green power. And this alcohol, which we are producing to the tune of almost 600 kiloliters per day, is going for petrol blending. So what I want to share at this point of time is that this circularity and of course at the same time green energy is something which is part of the strategy in terms of not only increasing the non-fossil fuel power in our energy portfolio, but all our boilers which are there in our thermal power plants also are having almost 10 to 15% of biomass inputs, which we are increasing over these years. Availability is something which is a challenge right now in terms of its availability around our sites where we operate. But at the same time, the new boilers which are being put up are also being ensured that there is maximum 40 to almost maximum 40% of biomass can be put in that boiler, so that our energy portfolio in terms of greening is something that is being looked after. As you might be aware of, this chemical sector is something which is hard to abate in terms of carbon neutrality when we talk about. But certainly going forward, we have energy initiatives in terms of not only using biomass in our energy mix, but also at the same time this CCU, which we call it as carbon, this storage as well as utilizing the same, is something which is also being looked at. And recently we have also commissioned a plant whereby carbon dioxide captured from our cement kiln is being utilized, not only utilizing the waste heat recovery, but also using this CO2 for converting our lime sludge, which I just mentioned from our calcium carbide plant, is getting converted into calcium carbonate through this carbonization. And that is ultimately utilized for our cement manufacturing, whereby the fresh lime that is used from the mining is eliminated. So that way, lot of energy has been saved. So this not only minimizing GHG emission, but at the same time making the process also sustainable in terms of greening the products is something, an initiative which is in place. And certainly there are challenges in terms of technologies, which I am quite hopeful in the times to come will be overcome as the technologies are getting developed. The third part of the strategy is the electrification, whereby even the green energy is also being looked at in terms of heating various chemical equipments also, which is an area which is being looked into. But again, it's a challenge in terms of availability as well as affordability of this green energy which we are talking about. And the fourth part is about the waste recovery. As I have already mentioned, efforts are made in terms of how the waste can be minimized as well as recycled to the maximum, so that our ultimate objective is to have zero waste to landfill. In that context, one of the waste which we are generating right now at our facilities were chloralkali, this brine sludge. So efforts are being made in terms of getting some value added products from this even brine sludge also, so that that sludge will also be gainfully utilized for various value added products. So that R&D efforts are being made, and I'm quite hopeful in the couple of years or so that success will certainly bring in a zero waste to landfill. So with these efforts, and besides that, I think raising awareness among the society, the life program which our Honorable Prime Minister has inaugurated and also launched in 2 years back. That is something which I think where the private sector can play an important role as a corporate, and where we are creating awareness in wherever we are operating among community, so that this awareness can really bring in a substantial reduction in GHG emission. So that's what we are doing. And as far as formal journey is concerned in terms of sustainability, we started off our sustainability reporting almost 5 years back. That was in 2018. And today, when I'm sharing this information with you, I'm very pleased to share with you that CDP is something which we started off last year, and for the first time we reported. And it's an opportunity whereby the challenges which we faced in terms of not only collecting this data, but also there were hot spots that were identified during this entire process of reporting. And now happy to share with you, there are internal benchmarks in terms of goals for energy, for waste, for various other aspects in terms of even plantation also. So these internal goals are being monitored and reviewed by senior management now, which ultimately is something contributing to our ultimate ESG goals. And besides this, diversity is also DEI, where a focused approach is also being put in by our various business leaders, having a action plan for next 3 years, so that our diversity also is inclusive in terms of various aspects. So with that, that's what I would like to share.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, and it's very, very, interesting to hear you speak in this forum, because I understand that the audience is largely from an awareness, education forum, and I think it was very interesting we use the words hard to abate and circular economy and ESG all the time. But I think what Mr. Sharma's presentation showed us is that there are several aspects that go into the business strategy, and there is also complexity within that. And I think we'll come back to you on some of the challenges later, but let me come to Ashu now, and maybe you could tell us how EXL looks at climate within the business strategy.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, hi. Am I audible? Yeah, sorry. So basically, we will start with slightly with the topic first. I think I will go back to the topic, and I was reading about it that education for climate action and sustainability. Few things which are actually eye-opener, and I think we should take back with us when we go home, or maybe when we talk to our children and peers, or maybe friends, relatives. In 1973, the first World Environment Day was announced, and this is the 50th year, 2023, and we are still talking about it. So I think I will leave it here, and I'm sure everybody will understand the message behind it. The second thing which I talk about is a very basic thing. I think there was a recent Tata IPL. I'm sure everyone has seen it. There were a lot of matches happening in India, because cricket is a sport which most of us are sitting in front of the TV. And there is an ad from Tata EV, and they talk about zero, but and on the screen there is a line, zero tailpipe emission. The line is written, not been spoken by the Tata during that advertisement, but how many of us know it? How many of us are explaining that to our children, maybe the next generation, and maybe in the school and university, how that has been taken? So I think this is related to the topic. So that's the reason I wanted to bring these two things which came into my mind from education, or maybe the awareness perspective, these two things which I want to call out. Let me go back to the basically question, which is EXL. So I think from the risk perspective, we were talking about, and I think the talent or the employees, whatever we say, was the risk, which is the number one in case of an IT or ITS organization. The second, maybe we normally used to take about, sometimes, let's say, information security or data security, data privacy, cyber security, any risk, but more related to information security. But I think with the push in last 4 or 5 years, and how different organization, I'll take the example of World Economic Forum. In 2020, one, they said climate action, or maybe the climate change, but this year they are saying failure if we don't take action towards climate change. So I think that's how organizations are looking at those reports which are issued by such reputational institutions. So I think this has become the third risk now. And why? Because pandemic has taught us. Secondly, we need to diversify our business into different geography. We need to understand this risk very well, because like you were talking about the client, the client may be structured in that manner. There was a recent fire in Canada jungles, in the forest, and something is happening in Philippines, in Cebu, where there was a flood and nothing happened for 21 days. Everything was shut with zero power. So I think, no doubt, this has become the very important topic, and actions have started. I think we can talk about actions, but I think I would go back to the next thing, which is opportunities and how we can do. So I think we are definitely looking at this risk. We are evaluating. We have done the evaluation part, and working towards that, where we are trying to make sure that our clients, again, I'm taking the same topic taken by Mr. Jairam, that clients are also asking us. So because sometime when our clients are talking to us, we are in their supply chain. So if we are doing great, technically their scope 3 is also being reduced. So the same manner, we are looking with our partners. So whenever we look for a new partners, so we are creating a sustainable supply chain. So I think these are the things which I really talk about from awareness, risk perspective, but from opportunity perspective, I think this is a great opportunity. If an organization is really investing in making sure they are becoming sustainable from a climate action perspective, I think there is an opportunity to attract eco-conscious client. Because let me tell you, the UK market, the European market, American market is still picking up, but these two markets, they are very, very sure that they will work with the partners who are maturing themselves into the climate action journey. So I think that's a very good topic, and it definitely creates a lot of opportunities area for a private sector or maybe an IT company or ITS organization. So I think that's how I will say.
Thank you, Ashu. I want to come now to Ajay, and I wanted you to give a different kind of perspective, because you don't come from a company per se. You come from an organization that helps companies develop strategies and also push them into processes like our disclosure process. So can you give us an idea in terms of what is it that companies are looking at, and how is it, and what are the priorities that you emphasize, having heard our three panelists?
Thank you, Pratna. Well, private sector plays a significant role if you look at how India is poised, or India is planning to have a 2070 net zero. So if you look at Europe, or if you look at US or other economies or other countries, they have somewhere or other come up with some kind of regulations, or at least made it mandatory that you have to come out with certain kind of climate disclosures in some form or other. So the push in India per se for private sector is not exactly regulatory. So it is, as one of our panelists already mentioned, it is mainly from some of their clients who may be, they may be the supply chain for them in Europe. So they have a requirement, so they push the clients in private sector over here. Then there are clients who have, adopted higher standards, like again some of the panelists of you, who adopted higher standards, and they voluntarily have identified that this is a problem and we want to address this thing. Again, this is coming from the corporate mandate and vision of the company that they want to do something around the climate. And third one is towards the investing, where people are seeking financing from certain agencies or who have their standards, and since you are receiving financing, you have to meet their standards, so they are working towards this. So these are the three major pushes that the private sector has in this space. And again, of course, the consumer market. In India, maybe consumer market is not such a push, but definitely in Europe and other places, consumer market is also a push. And gradually I would not have said this 5 years back that there is a discussion of climate happening in every boardroom, but as on date, we can definitely say, based on the kind of discussions we have, ESG or climate, these subjects are there in the boardroom discussions, and companies are thinking on the lines of what should we do, how should we position ourselves into these areas. So this is the first part of the thing, what is happening within the discussion. Now, in terms of preparing strategies, there are different ways of approaching. There are CEOs who would just walk out and say that we will be net zero by 2050, and then the whole team back works on how we can actually go to net zero. But then there are companies who have planned it and they know where they are, and then they decide how they are going to achieve net zero. Because we receive queries that we want to be by 2030 50% down. This is a commitment made by our top bosses. Now you tell us how to make a strategy around it. Or then it is it is reverse working. How is it possible? And then all these strategies do not happen just by wishing a certain thing. People have to assess their baseline, understand what are the risks in their businesses. They have to have some quantified idea of where are their climate risks, what are their main emissions, how much can they leverage from their supply chains if they commit to certain things. So there is a requirement to draft a certain roadmap based on quantified knowledge. You cannot just go out and have a strategy and then work towards it. So most of the queries that we receive is when around strategies after they have made certain commitments. So then it is it is like fitting in things so that things happen. There again there are things cannot be done without economic considerations. You cannot just decide to go green or switch over to renewable energy or e-vehicles just because you want to reduce carbon, because there is money involved and there is a business that has been going on for a certain time period based on a certain plan of profit and numbers. So these strategies are to be made based on practical discussions. It could not be, maybe it is not 2030, maybe it is 35 where you reach it, but this has to be arrived based on various calculations. There are various standards like SBTi and all really helps in achieving those numbers when we are calculating carbon reductions. Similarly, we also get inquiries around the carbon disclosures like CDP and all, where people want to know that how can they improve their scores. Now the objective is not exactly about how can we reduce the carbon footprint, but the objective of question is how can I improve the score, because last year's score was less, so I want a higher score. So what we tell them is if you actually work on the reporting and the impact of the reporting, the scores will automatically improve. The whole objective of this disclosure or going out and showcase is not that you get a good score. The objective is do something for the climate and bring it to the people, so other people also learn from the disclosure that they can do it, we can do it, and there is something that you can learn from it. So our my suggestion, or whenever we discuss those things, is broadly is if you focus on reporting. Now how to improve the reporting, that is another query that comes in. Improving about reporting means you need to have a policy and a procedure which is embedded into your system as business as usual. It cannot be an add-on thing that we are also doing something for the sustainability. It should be integrated well into your system so that it becomes a business as usual. I will not buy this, I will not do this, I will not leave this in this manner, or I will not dump it over there. Everything should be naturally built into the system so that it becomes a business as usual, or closer to business as usual. One is that. Second is, if you really want a good report, you will be more quantifiable. It has to be more quantitative. You cannot be qualitative. Yesterday I was tall, today I am taller. So it does not send any message. I mean, you can say I'm 10 inch taller from yesterday, then somebody can make out how tall you have become. And third is monitoring and following up. Have a KPI, have your baseline. But if you're not monitoring on regular basis and you're not pushing, the monitoring gives a feedback back into the system that it is not going as per the plan. So if you're not monitoring and assessing
need a baseline. So I think, the constant monitoring also happens because you constantly try to improve that baseline. So the good part about systems, the reporting systems that are there for a long time is that companies come back over and over again to do it. So you see every year they've increased. What we've seen in our lifespan as a disclosure platform is that by the third year, it's only by the third year that companies actually have emission reduction targets, because before that they are still trying to measure and assess and find a place, but it's by the third year actually that they have targets and emission reduction targets. Okay, moving on from strategy, I think let us get into, Ashu reminded me that the topic is education, so I think we should move a bit into the topic, right? So I think I'll start by asking a question that is about engagement, and I think companies, and many of you here probably work with corporates in terms of community engagement with people. So I wanted to ask Santosh, because HCL is like very prominent as far as their employee engagement programs are concerned and how they engage with communities. So I think maybe, Santosh, you could tell us what are the processes that you are involved in, and how do you make sure that people also know, while you have your internal process in place in terms of climate action, what are some of the areas that you also engage with other people in terms of informing about climate action?
No, thanks. And just before I get into that, the consultant inside me doesn't die. So I think something what Ajay mentioned, and I wanted to kind of touch upon that, and then I will come to this, is that he talked about the regulatory push not that sufficient enough in India. And to tell all of you is that the latest amendments which has come in is the most onerous across the world. And actually the industry associations are planning to go back to SEBI to, don't do this. Please. So I think if I tell you about the onerous, that would take another long time, but I can guarantee you that nowhere across a regulation has been so pushy in terms of this compared to the amendments which has happened on BRSR. Okay, back to the employees. Now, before I talk about the engagement, let me kind of give you a perspective as to how it became very important for us to engage with the employees. When we set out, we set our commitments for net zero by 2040. And we went to the SBTI, the Science Based Target Initiative. We put down all our commitments as an intermediate goal by 2030. We said that we will reduce our emissions by 50%, the scope 1 and 2, absolute, in the sense that HCL between 2020 to 2030 will grow maybe 10x, but our emissions in 2030, absolute terms, will be 50% of 2020. So that has been our commitment. And then, of course, on the scope 3 also, we said 42% reduction. All those things were done. Actually, our line of path is 1.3 degree. So it is well below 1.5 degree. 2020 was our baseline. And 2020, financial year 2020, which is March 31st. So when we did our baseline, it was business as usual. Then comes 2021. What really transpired is that the whole of the profile of emissions, it went for a toss. It kind of shifted like anything. I mean, what was our profile in 2020 and the plan which we had for 2030, all has gone down, because the whole work from home, it kind of transformed many things. So I think we will be the first people to go ahead and monitor the work from home emissions. We were the first people at least to report on that. And it was difficult. I mean, it's not an easy task. How do I go and ask an employee as to how much is the energy you consume on, working for, because it's home, right? I mean, I don't have separate meters. And so it is still a manner of approximation, but we did a decent way and we kind of estimated that. But the whole of this emission profile changed. Now I have a target of 42% reduction on scope 3. Now scope 3 is 60% of our overall emission now. Okay, 1 and 2 is only 40%. Now inside the scope 3, work from home emission is 32%. Now you can think that without engaging the employees, how am I going to reach it? So you can really understand from the force behind this. So we definitely had to engage with the employees. Now how we should be going about doing this? We started in 2022. We started November. I exactly remember the date, 10th of November. We launched what is called as a sustainability school for our employees. The first course which we launched was on climate change. Of course, after that there has been a number of courses, and we tied up with AXA Climate, and we created one of the best courses, which we think is still the best. But the way in which we went about is that we launched these courses in 3 waves. And the first wave was the science and the impact of climate change. So that was the first set of courses which we launched. And that really caught the attention, because you have a 230,000 workforce and you know the demographics of an IT company in India. It really caught the interest of the people. So the second wave came out in terms of what can you do. So it was more about how do you measure the footprint, both on a personal level, enterprise level, company level, all those things, and how you reduce your carbon footprint and all those things. So that was the second wave of the training which happened. Then we thought that is not enough, and we launched the third wave, which was more role-based. So we now have training modules on, if I am I'm working in the finance, how do I contribute? If I'm a procurement guy, how do I contribute? If I'm an IT guy, how do I contribute? If I'm a maintenance guy, how do I contribute? If I'm a risk management professional, how do I contribute? If I'm a marketing professional, how do I contribute? So we have now a whole set of trainings which are role-based. And that was the third wave, which was more specific to the role they have been functioning. And the kind of feedback what we have is fantastic, right from the leadership. Actually, our board members wanted, they wanted to do this course. So it was originally for the employees, and we had to kind of extend it to our board members. So some of our board members did those courses. And even with the employees, the kind of feedback what we get is pretty good. As of now, I think we are crossing almost about 20,000 hours of training inside that school, only on the climate side. The other courses are different. The idea is that what we have seen is that there is a, you are making the employee an agent of change in the whole of this process, because they have a definite influence in their ecosystem. We have seen that they have been speaking to their sphere of influence about this now. And even with the clients, they have started speaking about it. And so I think with all these things, that is now slowly transforming. When we track some of the things like, for example, the number of innovation suggestions which we get from the employees related to climate change, that has slowly started coming up now. The number of solution ideas which they put forward has kind of increased. So you can see that that's kind of transforming. So both, it started from how do we influence the employees, because we have to meet our scope 3 emission target. It started from that direction. But today I think we are seeing a much bigger impact by this engagement. Yeah, thanks.
So I think Santosh and earlier Mr. Sharma, and I think even Ajay made the point that I think the role of the leadership in companies in private sector is now really increasing, and even our data shows that almost 90% of the companies that disclose to us have some board level engagement in climate work, which is a very, very positive trend, and I think that drives a top-down process. But it's interesting that, what Santosh just mentioned in terms of how they started with a measurement and which ultimately became an employee engagement program. But I wanted to touch upon something else that is traditionally private sector is associated with, and we often, whenever we talk about the private sector, we just talk in the context of corporate social responsibility. So I think it's important to also discuss that, and I think, Mr. Sharma, I think the chemical sector as being part of the chemical sector, there's a lot of engagement and activity around which needs to be as part of being hard to abate. So I think maybe you could tell us about how your engagement has been in terms of CSR programs.
I think this question is very, very pertinent in terms of, as I mentioned, our one of the verticals which is directly linked with the agri-produce, which is sugarcane, as we are into the sugar business. But at the same time, we are also into the agri-inputs where the seeds are also getting developed in one of our R&D centers at Hyderabad. The efforts are made in terms of not only developing seeds which are weather resistant, pest control, and all these resistant seeds are being produced so that ultimately it impacts the productivity as well as the farmer income also is something which is very, very important in terms of positive impact. But at the same time, having said that, there are efforts which are made in the formal way of having flagship programs by the name of Meetha Sona, which is one of our flagship program in our sugarcane, you can say, field areas, where almost more than 2.5 lakh farmers are engaged. So creating this awareness on good agri practices. You might be aware of recently we had launched one egg water, you can say, award also, which is worth around rupees 2.6 crores, whereby every small entrepreneurs are getting encouraged to share those projects in terms of bringing this innovative changes across agri sector. That's one endeavor which company has undertaken. But besides that, under Meetha Sona, efforts are made in terms of not only creating awareness and agri practices, but also at the same time, what sort of hybrid seeds are to be used in terms of crop rotation and all those knowledge which is being imparted to these farmers by specifically using digitalization. As our co-panelists talked about digitalization, this is something which is now inevitable. And we have to see how it can be ultimately utilized. So that is also one of the thing which is being used 24/7. These call centers are available, which ultimately are being used by these farmers for all the information, but also at the same time some challenges if they are facing. So within a day's time, those challenges are addressed and solutions are appropriately provided to these farmers. That ultimately has benefited indirectly in terms of not only saving water, but also soil conservation, also in terms of the health of the soil, with various awareness programs that are being run by our associate partners also. And this could not be ultimately possible with collaboration with various our these CSR partners who are working across our sugar business. The other thing which I want to share is the second one, where this water ponds or wetlands are being restored. That is another endeavor whereby to the tune of some 900 billion liters of water was saved over last 7 years with these efforts. So that is through not only agri practices but rainwater harvesting as well as this restoration of wetland is something an ongoing effort. Besides plantation of various trees, which we have done over these years, almost 5 lakh trees have been planted over last 7 to 8 years. That's again a journey towards positive climate action that ultimately is not only for the benefit of the community at large, increasing their income at the first place, but also business sustainability also, where you are getting maximum produce per hectare. That's another aspect which also is seen through this initiative. And the third aspect is there is another program which is by the name of, we have a collaboration with Bhumitra, where smart agri practices are also being encouraged, and that also is providing the carbon credit directly to the farmers also. That's another endeavor which we have initiated in last 2 years' time. That's a way forward in terms of passing that benefit to the farmers, not only making their lives easier, but also at the same time making our business sustainable. And There is another vertical of our business, which is Shriram Farm Solution, which also provides certain specific nutrients solutions. These are basically formulated products that ultimately not only increases productivity but also reduces the use of other requirements during the growth of the plant. So that's another endeavor in terms of bringing that benefit to the farmers, but at the same time also sustainable agriculture is something that is being looked at. And because of these efforts, the yields per hectare is something which is very, very important to note, that that also has improved over the years. And that's what is from my side at this point.
Thank you. I want to move in, since we've been talking about, we've been talking about employee engagement and CSR, which is more about, engaging and, building awareness and getting people involved, and how can you make an impact around you, even within the organization and outside the organization. But I want to move into now, because as you said again, Ashu, this is an education for Climate Action Conference. And I wanted to actually also provide an opportunity to kind of also give some insights into some of the technical areas that, corporates have to engage in, because we are talking about emission reductions, we're talking about net zero targets. So since you've been very actively involved in things like target setting and, a net zero goal, maybe you can throw some light on that in terms of how your company is getting into that.
Yeah, so basically, while we are doing all the initiative, and it's very important that we should know the process. And when we say the process, we should know the data collection. So I think we need to measure our carbon footprint. And when we measure it, it is into 3 different buckets, which we say scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. It's a very quick, I would say, difference between scope 1, scope 3 is having inside your own boundaries, maybe inside your office, inside your home. But the scope 3 is something which is happening outside your boundary. So that's a quick, and then we need to go ahead and measure this globally. So it's not easy, it's a proper process, that data collection process which we need to do. And once we have this bucket, exactly like when we have to pass an exam, there's an institution called SBTI. So we need to go to them, science-based, basically targets initiative. So there is a tool. They have a very, very well-defined calculator. We need to go to them. We need to understand that calculator, and then we can decide our target. So like you were talking about 2040 for SCL as a target, R is 2045. But what we also did, that we took an interim target for scope 1 and scope 2, which is 2035, and 67.2% will be reduced by 2035, just to make sure that there is an interim target. The scope 3 is something which we are talking to SBTI as of now. We are in the last leg, and I think in the next 1 month we will be able to look at our validated targets by SBTI. So this is the one portion where we need to make sure that we have a targets which are well backed up by SBTI calculation and maybe the SBTI calculator, and announced to the street so that we are following them. But at the same time, how we do it. So for an IT and ITS company, scope 1, scope 2 is largely, we go back and look at our adoption of green energy, renewable energy, because scope 1, scope 2 largely playing around that. So we operate in India and 9 other countries, so we are working with different states or maybe the countries. But I think we are proud to say that we started in 2021, and today we have 22% of green energy into our portfolio. And with the roadmap which we have developed again with the partnership of few organizations, I think RE50 is something which we are looking at in next 2 years, because we have got a very good response and we are in the same side. But it's not easy. I think there is a process which we follow, and by that we go. But scope 3 is something which I wanted to talk about. And I think when sir was talking about the 32% of scope 3 is happening from the employee's home, I like to talk about that. So we were recently in touch with SBTI, and somehow SBTI is not, if an organization is willing, they will not account that emission into the scope 3. So that's a thing, and why this is coming up. because they have some background to it, but I'm sure there will be a study soon in it. But as of now, they are not. If organization is also willing, they are okay to exclude that from that. You know what's happening? Because when the work from home comes back to office, and slowly and gradually that is happening. I'm telling you, 2 years back, or maybe the 1.5 year back, everybody was saying 50-50 for IT and ITES. And then slowly and gradually this becomes 60-40. Now, IT and ITES are looking at 70-30 model. So technically that 32% will be reducing to maybe 18%, 12%, 15%, but scope 1 and scope 2 will increase. So that is something which I want to talk about. The other thing, typically in an Indian model, IT and ITES provide employee transport. And I think this is a very, very important topic. We pick and drop our employees home to home. So when we do that, what we do, we run either diesel vehicle or CNG vehicle or petrol vehicles. And that's again go to our the scope 3 emission. If you ask us, this is around 15 to 16%. But then how to reduce it? No doubt there's a lot of things happening on EV adoption. But again, will EV be, what is the emission factor? Are we charging EV through a green power or just again the same power? So we really don't know. So I think scope 3 is something where a lot of focus is happening as of now. We are learning a lot of stuff, but EV adoption or maybe another fuel, the bio-CNG, is something which we are hearing a lot. Let's see how it goes. Hydrogen, India has taken a lot of steps, but employee transport will be a segment where either we will look for deploying bigger vehicles, maybe hybrid vehicles, and maybe a development with our logistics providers where we have green power, they will put our charging station there so that we can really take care of our scope 3. So I think you're right, a lot of focus on scope 1, scope 2, but that very, very straightforward with the renewable energy. But scope 3 is something where everybody has to work together, even the airline. In a global company, air travel is again 4 to 5%.
Yeah, I think even the personal engagement becomes very important there in terms of how much you engage. So that is the reason why I wanted you to talk about the target part of it, because you look at the science of it a lot, but you don't talk about it from the perspective of how much you need. I mean, if we look at the scope 3 emissions that have been disclosed to CDP in the last so many years, most of it has been on business travel because that's the easier one to disclose on. Others are difficult because you're talking about consumption of a product, how much energy that product is consuming, so it goes into so much details like that. So I think that is where the engagement part becomes very important. Interesting discussion there, maybe another session on scope 3, but I want to come back to Ajal, and I wanted to ask you a basic question, and in terms of a lot of companies come to you and want to start their sustainability journey. So what is your advice to them and how do you tell them to begin?
Actually, a lot of companies do come. I mean, now those who come want to start are mostly startups and new ones. Most of the companies have, embarked on some sort of sustainability journey. You won't find any, unless it's, owner-owned company or something where sustainability has not begun in some form or other. Otherwise, you look at any corporate, some amount of sustainability work has started has begun. If there are companies which are startups and those which come to us, I would say them first focus on governance part, because most of the, startups are facing governance issue more than sustainability. Anyway, that's the element of ESG, the G is more bigger for them right now. But, to start with, first of all, they need to have a roadmap of what they want and what is their intention, and also a knowledge of their risk appetite. How much of a climate risk or how much they can cater to the climate risk within their business. And also to know that what is their risk capability. Their business may have X amount of risk, but what is their capability to also address those risks. So first of all, they should have a climate focused risk appetite framework to understand within themselves, my business is around, say, I'm providing logistics to certain point. So as he said, there are vehicles which will be moving around, there will be diesel, there will be petrol, there will be emission. But can they really, move on to e-vehicles tomorrow? Do they have the capacity to do that? Or how much can they do within the, scheme of their business? What are the low-hanging fruits? So initially they have to identify as part of their strategy, how much can they do and how spaced in, spatially or, in time that they can align it that, we can do X in 3 years, what you call as short-term goals or near-term goals or long-term goals. So these two things they should already know before they start a sustainability journey. They don't have to make a commitment. Nobody is coming after them immediately to make a commitment. Even for MSMEs and larger groups, not just startups, but they're starting this journey for sustainability. The first thing to know is what is their actual intent, and so if it is driven by like some kind of financing, that we will not get finance unless we have certain amount of climate disclosure, certain things in our place, then it has to follow the requirements of the lenders and other things. So then you have to shape up according to what, if your focus is only towards lending or other thing, then you have to focus over there. But if your focus is very voluntary, then you have the option of choosing your roadmap, your near-term goals, short-term goals. Even in terms of selection of sites, while we only talk about carbon reduction and other things, there is a strong element of physical risk, which is, as we discussed about increasing frequencies of cyclones. If you have a bottling plant located in an area which is definitely going to go down, low in groundwater levels in next 15, 20 years. So, physical risk assessment also for new companies which have larger expansion plans or areas, want to explore in areas, even like real estate. Even after, if you notice that the Bangalore had a localized flood where a lot of residential colonies were underwater, the real estate is really, in a situation where they have come to us with a lot of studies for physical risk assessment to understand what will the scenarios after 10 year, 15 year, 20 year in these areas. How can you model it and showcase whether the level of rainfall or whether if you have close to coastal area, what could be the impact if there are frequency of cyclones, all those things. So these kind of assessments are also very essential for people who are expanding or who are in the newly thinking about expanding and in the area where they have not established all their establishment everywhere. With those who have established, then there is only retrofitting. But anybody who's taking new initiatives, they should clearly know what they want. The intent should come from the top, but it should not stay at the top. It should trickle down till the bottom. It has to go to all the stakeholders. Like if you are making a commitment, then the finance should know what is expected of them. The purchase should know what is expected of them. The legal should know what is expected of them. The HR should know what is expected of them. If it does not percolate and it remains on the top, it does not really get implemented. The last man on the ground who is doing certain thing has been driving that petrol car all his life. He will never get the essence of why I have got this e-vehicle, or today they have changed my transport to electric and I'm driving this around. What is the purpose? He might just think maybe this is a trend or something. If he also know the purpose why it has been changed, he may also be able to contribute. He may not contribute significantly, but there will be contribution from bottom also, which can come up and help the company in that way. So
yeah, I think this engaging every department, every line of leadership, I think that is very important. And I think when you're working in the space, you think everyone is thinking about it, but actually it's not that way. And I think there are other priorities that people have. I have more questions, but I just wanted to ask if the audience has any questions. Any questions? Yeah, first you, somebody. You can tell us who your question is for.
Yeah, hello. My name is Jyoti, and my question is to Mr. Jairam and Mr. Sharma. The reason being, both of you have undertaken a lot of initiatives which have obviously given you very significant outcomes. So I engage with the MSME sector and large corporates as well. So I wanted to know, since, the question of investing in climate change typically requires a lot of money, right? It's very expensive. And also, given that the targets that you undertake are fairly long-term, how do you kind of marry this with your internal business, commercial, and profitability objectives? Because obviously, when it comes to investing in various initiatives, particularly at the production level, supply chain level, there's a huge amount of investment required. So how do you manage your internal goals and objectives, and at the same time look at it from a long-term perspective?
Yeah. So First of all, there is a number of initiatives where you don't have to worry about cost, to be very precise. And he might have a different view because he comes from a manufacturing, but IT sector in India, most of them are cash rich. And so that way, investing into something, the payback is much better than keeping the money in the bank. So from
No,
that,
I was talking from a medium scale companies, small, medium scale, who are
No,
reasonably in the 500 crore.
Even in
Yeah.
the medium scale or even in the small scale, when it comes to some of the things like adopting renewables and all those things, it is very simple. The cost benefits really work in favor. Okay. It is only when you are looking into the scope 3 part of it is where it becomes engaging with your suppliers and employees and all those things, where it might become. But if you look at the a little long-term view, even that is beneficial. If your horizons are short-term, that's where the challenge would happen. But I do not want to ride on the the opportunity or the cost-benefit viewpoint, because what happens is that the cost-benefit viewpoint has been hammered down multiple times. As a consultant, I used to do that. You do this, there is a benefit and all. But I think the drive has to come from more sensitiveness.
Yeah.
Rather than the cost part of it. So that is the sustainable way of imparting into the this journey, rather than on the cost side of the thing. So I think it's a thought process which requires the change. But having said that, I think you can go through almost 50% of your journey in the cost benefit, whether it is an SME as well.
I'm just coming to you.
Yeah.
I echo with what Santosh has mentioned. Cost is something which is afterward. First of all, you should know what is that is required to be done.
Correct.
So I think he has already touched upon the regulatory requirement is already there now. Under BRSR, you are supposed to engage with your 75% of your supply chain partners.
Yeah.
So with that, let me share our experience. We have started off almost a year back, mapping who are the ultimate stakeholders, and having all those mapped, we started first of all creating that awareness what we are doing in terms of ESG.
Okay.
So that first of all, that is the first step towards raising that awareness among our MSME partners.
Okay.
Then comes the next step, the cost, in terms of actions that will be emerging out of this dialogue that you have initiated. But the first step is, first of all, this dialogue has to happen between the two.
True.
And during those interactions, we were amazed. Some of the things what we shared with them, they were already doing. So in terms of circularity, what I talked about is something they were already doing, and it ultimately inspired other partners also. That's something which was one thing which I would like to share.
Okay. Thanks. That's very helpful.
I
Thanks.
think I just wanted to also, just 1 second, I wanted to add something, because we run the supply chain program where we also invite companies to disclose on their supply chain. And I don't think finance or the economics has been an issue, because companies do want to take it up right now. But capacity is a major issue, because I think, it's very difficult for these companies to actually go down to the level where you kind of can estimate or assess emissions. So even from the basics, we have found that, so what we are trying to do right now is to inbuild some capacity building components within the whole process. So I think that is one angle that, and sometimes the capacity building is what actually requires cost,
Preparedness is more of an issue rather than worrying about the outcomes.
Sorry,
Thanks.
I've kept you waiting for very long, please.
No worries.
Please go ahead.
My name is Ashish Tripathi. I'm head of strategy with a company called Biofix. This is a waste to energy company. The question is slightly different. The question is in terms of education, what is the platform industry is providing to startups like us? Because we are a company which is even working with Mobis Foundation. We convert complete biomass into biogas, hydrogen, and we have ready plug-and-play solutions. But we have been more successful with PSUs, municipal commissioners, and government and companies like IOCL. But we are finding resistance because this question is very important, that ROI and IRR are the actual parameters on which the industry is end of the day taking up these projects. And even when we are providing IRR north of 50%, we're still finding issues. So this question is to Mr. Sharma and Mr. Pillai, who are front-ending the industry, how and what platforms we can leverage with companies like us, which are not a startup, actually come out of the startup mode also with plug-and-play solutions. We are awarded by Vice President also, but we are still struggling with these kind of solutions to plug in the market.
A very good question. At this point of time, I would like to share a real case right now. We are coming up with a compressed biogas plant, which is from Pressmud. It's new thing right now, where a new startup is now being collaborated for this specific project, which is right now under erection. Same way, many of you might be aware of, in a distillery process, there is a slop which is generated out of this distillery concentrated spent wash, which is burned in a specially designed boiler. The ash arising out of it is rich in potash. So there are efforts in terms of making potassium sulfate out of it. That's ultimately a nutrient for the soil, where potash can be one of the nutrients. So that project also is in collaboration with some partner. I don't remember the name right now, but it is some Gujarat-based company which is giving all the inputs for this recovery. So that's something where the new startups, if they are confident, I think corporates like ours are willing to associate with them in terms of not only with those startups, but also academic institutions are something we are looking forward to in terms of really implementing at the grassroots level. Yeah.
So I'll just have a different dimension to that. You know, PSUs don't tend to actually invest and do R&D and, you know, have biogas, but private sector will do that. They have the money and the capabilities to actually explore things like biogas at their own end. So your entry into PSUs might be much more easier than getting into private sectors, who might be thinking of doing similar thing by themselves also. But I would also add to it that in the solar potential and the wind and all the renewables that people switch to move away from carbon can only be reliable to a certain extent. And it is also bound by the transmission and transportation in some part when you have that. But you know, buying into solar can be only limited because everybody is going for that. It is just a matter of time when people switch on to all these kind of other alternatives. So I think you are there in the right time. It's just a matter of some time when you will also find your place under the sun. Yeah. Thank you.
So just one more question before Alka had put up her hand before. So yeah, before I ask my panelists to make their closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Alka Tomar, and I'm very delighted to be here in this discussion because I'm doing my PhD now and on exactly same topic. And so a lot of issues are there. That's what I'm studying in terms of sustainability reports, and we are looking at 5 sectors. But main point that is there, and I think Ajay also mentioned about reporting, sustainability reporting. And now with the changing scenarios, with all that different frameworks floating, Scope 3 definitely is one of the emerging issues. How do we, and another aspect that is what I'm looking at, and I need some answers, and today with Mr. Sharma and Pillai and plus Santosh, what you're talking about, when you have said that there's a reporting formats are there, frameworks are there, but then you have CSR, and plus you have nature-based climate solutions, and then you have climate capture and storage and utilization of technologies. Now and plus your employee engagement. So now if you have to marry all that with your sustainability reporting, and then you have to get to better scoring, then how do you really put that together in terms of your consultancies, in terms of reporting? Because that's what in our sector, in the sector that I'm studying, lacks quite a lot. There are a lot of initiatives that are there, but when it comes to reporting, there are huge gaps. So how do we do that? And plus, that's one favor I wanted, that in case we can visit your carbon capture storage plant that you said you're installing or is there, so as part of my study.
This is something which I share because I am also a qualified safety professional. Whatever good thing is happening in terms of caring for somebody, whether it is road safety, I think you are free to share, because it is the entire, not only country, but entire world will also get benefited. This is something where it is for a best human cause. Everybody is struggling to limit the temperature to less than 1.5 degree, as we all hear. But I think the life campaign is something which we have to promote. I don't know, because many times I had taken a lot of sessions in even IIMs also, where students are not even aware of when is the environment day. Believe me what I am saying. So this is something, World Environment Day, that awareness is missing. So how can you think of life awareness? That is something which I feel is a real challenge. All of you who are sitting in this room, I think once we go back, share these things with everyone. Now coming back to your question, ma'am, I think reporting part is something which is a challenge. I think it is, again, what Ajay has already mentioned, it is governance which drives the reporting part. How much transparent you are internally, first of all. Like I mentioned, we have not committed so far. I am honest in speaking right now here, net neutrality in terms of company, because we are hard a bit, as I mentioned. But certainly, we are right now at 42% direct energy is green energy because of our sugar portfolio, as well as other initiatives that we have taken in terms of energy efficiency. And we have also come up with renewable also. At our one of the facility in Gujarat, we have come up with 50 megawatt renewable energy. That's a hybrid one, which is already commissioned now. So there are efforts in terms of bringing that change internally. But certainly going forward, as I mentioned, we started off our journey 5 years back. But in last 2 years, we have been now part of DJSI reporting, where we participated. Then next step was EcoVerdes. Then this year we participated in CDP also. I think it's a journey which ultimately is something which is inherently, the company's, I think, leadership is something which can drive this in a very, very progressive manner. But having said that, the reports which is being published or being shared in the public domain, what sort of format, whether they are reporting as per the GRI format, getting is assured, I think these forums like CDP is something which gives you not only poses challenges, but at the same time, those are the risk which you can really make them as a part of our opportunity. Let me tell you, when we reported a year back, it requires a lot of data compilation. So those data points were compiled from various functions. The first thing which was required, as I mentioned, for not only MSMEs, for internal functions, we had to create that awareness first of all. Because everyone, if you are asking for the data, the first question will, why this data? You are already reporting some data. In CDP, it is more deep dive, which gives you a deeper thought in terms of what you are doing. So all those things can really help you in better reporting. But I think governance is which drives all these reportings, whatever is happening around.
Thank you. I think we can continue the discussion over tea, but before we end, I just want one quick one-liner from each one of you on your top priority for climate action. Ashu, we'll start with you. Small steps, big impact. Santosh.
For us, it's integration to everything. So it's very important that this is integrated to every process, every decision. So that requires quite a bit of capacity building. So that's where we are focusing on.
Capacity building.
I would use this two words only. Mindful and deliberate utilization of resources is something which we should keep it in mind at all places, wherever we are.
Fantastic.
I think acceptance that the climate change is happening, and even if it is not visible, the fact that we cannot see it happening or impacting you immediately is also holding up. If we were told that corona will happen over a period of 20 years, we would have waited for it to actually happen over, and then only we would have done. Similarly, climate change is happening, and the first thing is acceptance that this is something serious and it is actually happening. Then only people will start to respond towards it.
There you have it, the importance of education. So I'll end here today. Thank you very much for being such a delightful audience, and thank you to my panelists for this very interesting conversation.
Discussion on private sector engagement in climate change. To close, I would request Ms. Pratna Bora to hand over a token of appreciation to our distinguished We have a token of appreciation to our moderator as well. Jo- We express our sincere appreciation to our distinguished panel of speakers, Mr. Ashu Kalra, Mr. Ajay Pillai, Mr. Santosh Jairam, and Mr. K.K. Sharma. Your profound insight, extensive knowledge, and valuable experience have enriched our understanding of how the private sector can contribute to addressing climate change. Your presence today has been truly inspiring. We would like to extend our gratitude to Ms. Pratna Bora, India Director of CDP, who skillfully moderated the discussion, ensuring that the conversation flowed seamlessly and all viewpoints were heard. Your expertise and adept moderation greatly contributed to the success of this session. A special thanks to our audience. Your active participation, thought-provoking questions, and unwavering commitments to addressing climate change are the driving force behind today's meaningful exchange of ideas. Thank you very much.
हाँ कोई है तो देखा
So we have 12 candidates.
Hello. Hello. Yes. Uh, can we start?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you everyone first of all, and whoever participant, I would like to thank from ICSE 3 behalf of whole team organizers and whoever back end, front end, everyone. So I would like to say something about this participations from the each candidate, that we are giving you 4 minutes for each presentation. We have 1 hour total and there are 12 presentation. So we have already lost 10 minutes in our time schedule. So first of all, we would like to call Maruf Abid and Rishad Abdullah. So is he present?
These are abstract ID number 5. Okay.
Okay, okay, yeah, but well.
Yeah. Rishad Abdullah, you may please start the presentation.